look him up here. So CNBC, Fox Business, CNN. He's an author, a financial journalist, newspaper analyst. Andy has also worked as the global currency and public policy strategist for the Bank of Montreal. So you've got real life experience.
Kenny, you don't have to read the whole thing. No, we're good. We're good. No, just stop right now. They don't care.
I'm going to hand it off to Andy.
Thanks, Kevin. Hey, we're going to get into a bunch of different things here today. I'm going to try to explain a little bit what's going on in the financial markets, so hopefully that'll be of interest. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of volatility. Let me see if we've got the slides working. And we don't. Yeah, let me just see. Yep. It's not moving. Let me just see if I can actually physically forward it. No, it's got to be connected. There we go. Okay, so before we get started, well, first of all, let me say thank you for coming. This is great. It means a lot to us that you come to the conference and that you interact with us and that we share ideas. I think this is one of the key things that the agency does, and we really appreciate your feedback and also the questions that you have, so thank you very much. With that in mind, let me ask you a question myself. Like, who's leaving today? Everybody's leaving today? So, have you checked your flights? Right? So you know there's a storm coming, right? This afternoon? Yeah, there's a storm coming. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that kind of, I don't know how often you guys travel. I travel a lot, almost every week. And I don't know about you, but I'm always looking on my phone and my apps for the weather. And as soon as I see a weather pattern, it starts to make me kind of nervous and uncertain about what's happening here, especially in Washington, D.C., getting in and out of this city. And so that makes me kind of feel like kind of bad in my stomach a little bit. I start thinking about all the problems that are going to be there, and you start thinking, oh my gosh, now I'm not going to get back home, and then I won't be able to fix my leaky sink, which, by the way, I have a leaky sink right now. My wife just called me and told me that. So as soon as I get back home, I have to deal with that, right? So do you ever get that feeling in your stomach like that? Because if you do, that's exactly what's happening in the financial markets right now. There's uncertainty. So I want you to remember that as we start to go through this, that markets are a reflection of a lot of different pieces and parts to a puzzle. But one of the things we should never forget is that they're driven by humans. And we have algorithms, for sure, we have models and so on, but you gotta remember that a lot of those algorithms and models are created by human beings. And even if you have a black box that creates the algorithm, you still have to go back over it and take a look at it to make sure it makes sense. So let's keep that in mind as we go through these slides and I try to explain to you what's going to go on. All right, who am I? I'm the Chief Market Intelligence Officer for the agency. I work directly with the chairman. I report directly to the chairman. We created this role specifically so that the agency could have a global macro perspective on the markets. Again, we're regulating financial markets, we're regulating the derivatives or the risk transfer markets. You should know what's going on in those markets. You should understand what's driving the values, because if you don't, you're not going to be a very good regulator. And that's why Chris brought me in to help the agency. And to that end, we created a team called the Market Intelligence Bureau. That's my disclaimer, of course. If you're ever speaking for the U.S. government, you have to disclaim that my views reflect only my views and not that of the U.S. government or the chairman's or the CFTC overall. But this is the group that we, oops, it's looking ahead a little bit. Come on back. There we go. This is the division that we created, not division. This is the bureau that we created at the agency, the Market Intelligence Bureau. We create research looking at market dynamics, liquidity, and fragmentation. You can now get that. We've done some really interesting work on things like shale and its impact on the energy markets, and really the impact on the NYMEX market. But we've also done some intensive data mining where we looked at 2.2 billion events for what you would call flash crashes, but we call sharp price movements. And if you go to the website at cftc.gov, find the Market Data and Analysis button, click on that, and then you have to click on staff reports to find this stuff. I apologize for that, but that's where it's at. And it's a great resource. If you are going back to your home countries, you can take a look at some of the things that we've been working on. And my team is a group that reaches out to the public sector and to other regulators to elicit ideas and to share the information that we have so that we can actually be better at what we do. But this is one of the things that the chairman and I created, and I direct the research for that. Now, as you probably already know too, because I had the slide up there, we do something very unusual here at this agency. So I want you to pull out your phones. I'm serious, pull out your phones. If you have your phone, pull it out. You have your phone, don't put it down. Pick it back up. Do you know where your podcast button is on your phone? Click on it. Type in CFTC Talks. You got it? Now click subscribe. Just kidding. Only if you want to get it. Now, this podcast is unusual, and I'll tell you why. Because it is not just solely focused on regulation. It is focused on market dynamics, liquidity, fragmentation, and structure. We get the best and the brightest in the world to talk to us. Why do we do that? Well, part of it is customer education, right? We're trying to educate the public on what's going on in the financial market, but it's also a great net to cast out to help us understand what's going on in the markets. I mean, if I can talk to a Nobel Prize winner for economics and learn about the economy, that's a pretty good thing. Or if I can talk to the head of the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank and ask him about monetary policy, then I have a much better understanding of how that works. And that's exactly what we do on that podcast. And those are the people that we've had on. We've had on Professor Bob Shiller from Yale, and I just had on Rob Kaplan from the Dallas Federal Reserve. You can get all of those. We archive those. We also do interviews with people from here. You probably have been curious about Bitcoin as an example, right? How did the CFTC get involved with that? What was the self-certification process like? We did something very unusual, but it's also the hallmark of this agency when it comes to transparency. We had every division director on the podcast talk about that process. We did it as a kind of a group chat, right? And we had everybody on so that we were really clear about what we had done with Bitcoin. And it's a wonderful way to communicate to the public why we do what we do and in the process of what we did. So there's not confusion. It's a great avenue to communicate to the public at times. So it's something that I would advocate you can think about doing in the future. So today, we want to talk about, oops, this thing keeps jumping ahead. My apologies. Let's see if I can get it to go back. I want to talk about the storm, right? We're talking about a lot of volatility in the markets. And just let me review really quickly what this looks like visually. So I'm going to toss up a couple of graphs. But even, I got these from earlier this week on Monday, and the markets have moved significantly even since then. So just really quickly, if we take a look at this graph, and what this is S&P GSCI for industrial metals, precious metals, agriculture, and energy. Take a look at that graph. Without knowing exactly which is which one do you think is the blue line? Because that's the one that's up this year. Of all the commodities that are out there, what has gone up this year? Exactly, energy. Thank you. The rest of them are negative. Precious metals, industrial metals have been falling recently, even this week, even more than what this slide shows. Agricultural prices have fallen. Agricultural prices are at lows and continue to be at lows really from 2014 on. And this is putting a lot of pressure on domestic producers in agriculture. It puts pressure on them to be very, very, very efficient as well. And that gets them into doing some interesting things when it comes to blockchain, actually. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this is kind of just a microcosm of what we're dealing with when we're talking about the financial markets. Here's another picture. This is the VIX index and the S&P 500. And the VIX is the white line, and the S&P 500 is the green line. So you can see they're inversely correlated. Actually,